The attack didn't come from a stranger, it came from the woman I was supposed to call family. 1 second I was sitting quietly in the front pew, hands folded, heart steady, and the next, Dorothy Morissette's voice cracked across the church like a whip. "You're not a mother. You're a disaster." She didn't just say it, she hurled it, loud enough to flip every smiling face into stunned silence, loud enough that even the flowers seemed to stop breathing. But the part that chilled my blood wasn't the insult. It was the laugh that followed it. Short, sharp, confident. Talia's laugh. It sliced through me faster than anything, her mother said. A laugh that told me this wasn't an accident, this was an agreement, a shared disrespect, a wound they'd been waiting for the perfect stage to open. Something shifted behind my ribs, not pain, clarity. A clarity so cold it burned. At the altar, Corin stood still. Too still. His shoulders locked. His breath paused. His head tilted slowly like a man hearing the final proof of a truth he'd been refusing to accept. He turned. Not quickly. Not in shock. He turned with the calm of a man who understood that his entire future had just changed shape behind him. His eyes reached me first. They always did. Then they moved to Dorothy, still standing, chest trembling with the afterglow of her own cruelty. And then to the bride, who suddenly looked like a child caught making fun of the wrong person. "What's funny?" Corin asked. His voice didn't rise. It dropped lower than the whispering crowd, lower than the church's breath, lower than the part of him that still believed in that ceremony. Talia's smile shattered. Dorothy blinked, realizing too late that she hadn't just embarrassed me, she'd exposed herself. The pastor tried to speak, but Corin's stillness swallowed the room whole. I sat motionless, steadying my breath, steadying my dignity, not shrinking, not breaking. Names carry weight, and mine, Olivet Harrington, had carried my son farther than anyone in that room knew. Before I go on, tell me where you're watching from, because what happened in the next 20 seconds changed everything. Corin stepped down from the altar. One step, another. Each one slower than the last, like he was peeling himself out of the life he almost stepped into. Dorothy reached out. "Corin, don't." He didn't even look at her. His eyes were fixed on me. At the end of the aisle, he paused just long enough to button his jacket, one single motion that felt like a verdict. "I'm not marrying into disrespect," he said. No tremble, no hesitation, just truth. Gasps broke like falling glass. A bridesmaid started crying. Someone in the back whispered a prayer. I felt tears sting the back of my eyes, but none of them fell. Mothers learn early how to hold storms without letting them leak. Corin offered his hand. "Come on, Ma." And just like that, a wedding unraveled. An entire future snapped in half. A room full of witnesses watched the man I raised decide, without anger or noise, that his own dignity and mine were worth more than a ceremony built on disrespect. Behind us, Dorothy called his name again. Her voice cracked this time, but Corin never turned around. The wedding was over. And the consequences, well, those were only beginning. He didn't look back as he came down that aisle. The music had stopped without anyone touching a thing, but the silence made its own kind of sound, chairs creaking, a stifled cough, someone's bracelet clinking as their arm trembled. Every eye followed my son's steps like they were watching something sacred break. I rose before he reached me. My knees didn't feel steady, but my spine did. Years of bending for everyone else had taught me how not to fold when it finally mattered. Corin stopped right in front of me, close enough for me to see the muscle ticking in his jaw, the calm that only shows up when a person has already made up their mind. "Let's go, Ma," he said. No announcement. No explanation, just that. A murmur rolled through the room. The pastor shifted his weight. One of the bridesmaids pressed a hand to her chest. Somewhere behind us, a child started to whimper before the sound was swallowed by the weight of adults trying not to move. "Corin, baby, hold on," a voice said behind us, Talia's voice, small now, stripped of the easy confidence it had worn all morning. He didn't turn. His hand slid into mine, warm and steady, and that touch told me more than any speech could have. I had stood beside him when he took his first steps on shaky baby legs, and now he was the one holding me upright as he walked away from everything we'd spent months preparing for. "Corin, please, Talia tried again, closer now. Can we just talk in the back for a minute? Dorothy was quicker. Her heels clicked down the aisle, every step refusing to accept the reality forming in front of her. This is unnecessary, she said, forcing a laugh that never reached her eyes. We are all upset. Things were said. She knows I didn't mean it like that. She brushed a hand toward me without really looking at me, like I was an item on a shelf she kept forgetting to dust. Let's all calm down, she added, turning half toward the pastor, half toward the guests. We're family. We can fix this. That word sat wrong on my skin. Family. It sounded borrowed in her mouth. Corin finally moved his head, just a fraction, enough to let his gaze pass over her. You spoke from your heart, he said. I heard you clearly. The gentleness in his voice hurt more than anger would have. Dorothy opened her mouth, shut it, then tried again. I was emotional, she insisted. You know how wedding days are. Stress, pressure. People say things they don't mean in the heat of the moment. Talia came up beside her, fingers trembling around the bouquet. Her mascara hadn't run yet, but her smile was gone, and in its place sat something rawer, fear, or something very close to it. Corin, I'm sorry, she said softly. I shouldn't have laughed. It happened so fast. I didn't think. Please don't walk out on me like this. My heart tugged at the sound of her voice, but my hand stayed in his. There are moments a mother interferes and moments she learns to stay out of the way of the man her child has become. This was his moment. You laughed at my mother's humiliation, he said. That was not fast. That was clear. No one moved. Even the air felt like it was holding itself still, scared to brush against anything in case it shattered. Dorothy stepped forward again, lower now, closer to pleading. She raised you well, she said, nodding at me as if she finally remembered I had a face. You're a good man. Don't throw your life away over one sentence. My fingers tightened around his. The suggestion that he was throwing his life away by stepping away from disrespect scraped something deep inside me. But I kept my mouth closed. I wanted to see what he would choose, free from my voice. He took a breath, slow and measured. My life doesn't start at this altar, he said. It started the day that woman back there decided I was worth giving hers to. He nodded slightly toward me without taking his eyes off Dorothy and Talia. A few guests turned to look at me differently then, not as the quiet woman in the third row, but as the center of the storm. Talia's shoulders shook. She placed the bouquet on the nearest chair, as if freeing her hands would help her hold on to him instead. I love you, she whispered. Please don't do this. He looked at her for a long moment, and I saw every memory cross his face, late-night calls, shared plans, future conversations that now had nowhere to go. His expression softened for a breath. Then, it settled again. I won't build a home with people who can't respect my mother, he said. That was it. No shouting, no scene, just a line drawn so clean you could feel the cut. He turned fully then, guiding me down the aisle. No music played. Chairs scraped as a few people stood, unsure whether to follow or sit. The pastor stepped back, hands folded, eyes low. We passed row after row of faces, some sympathetic, some stunned, some already storing the story to repeat later. Just as we reached the back, I heard a whisper behind us, young, strained, and afraid to be heard by the wrong ears. If he leaves, everything ends, Kaylin Morissette said. And from the way his voice shook, I knew he meant it. The doors of the church closed behind us, and the air outside felt different, too bright for what had just happened. Sunlight hit the pavement like it had no idea a wedding had died on the other side of those walls. Corin walked me to the car without saying a word, his hand still wrapped around mine as if letting go too soon might make everything fall apart a second time. He opened the passenger door and waited until I was settled before walking around to his side. The moment he slid behind the wheel, the quiet folded itself over us like a blanket nobody asked for. He didn't put the key in the ignition right away. He just sat there, both hands on the steering wheel, breathing slow, steady breaths that sounded too controlled for a man who had just walked away from his own altar. My heart was still racing, but not from shock anymore. Something else sat there now, heavy, clumsy, unsure of where to land. Pride and worry tried to occupy the same space in my chest, and neither one had enough room. "I can call a cab," I said finally. "You don't have to rush anywhere with me." He shook his head once. "I'm taking you home," he answered. His voice sounded worn at the edges. He turned the key, and the engine hummed to life. As we pulled out of the parking lot, I caught sight of figures gathering near the church entrance. One white dress, one familiar posture. Hands reaching, too late. Corin kept his eyes on the road. The first call came before we reached the main street. His phone lit up in the cup holder, screen bright against the shadow inside the car. No name, just a number he clearly recognized, because his jaw clenched as soon as he glanced down. He let it ring out. The second call followed less than a minute later. This time it flashed a name. Dorothy. He pressed the side button and sent it straight to silence. The car swallowed the sound, but not the meaning. "They are going to keep calling," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. Wind moved against the windows. The world outside going on with its errands and schedules. Somewhere, people were laughing over brunch plates and clinking glasses. In our car, there was only the low rumble of the engine and the two of us riding side by side with a future neither of us had been prepared to consider when we woke up that morning. I watched his profile while he drove. His face carried the same lines I had memorized since he was a boy, but there was something new there. An older kind of hurt, the kind that does not cry easily. His knuckles sat pale against the steering wheel. Every so often, his thumb tapped against the leather, as if counting out a rhythm only he could hear. "I didn't expect you to do that," I said after a while. "Not like that." He inhaled slowly, eyes still on the road. "I couldn't stand there and pretend you did not matter," he said. "Not in that room, not in front of them." The phone buzzed again. Same name. He flipped it over so the screen faced down. "This was supposed to be your day," I murmured. "It still is," he replied. "I just changed what it means." The words settled between us. I turned my face toward the window, letting the blur of passing buildings hold my gaze. A florist shop, a child dragging a balloon, a couple stepping out of a car, dressed up, smiling, holding hands. Life did not pause to acknowledge that my son had just cut himself free from a future he had been building for years. Another call came in, then another. The ringtone started to feel like a physical thing pressing against my temples. Corin finally snatched the phone up, thumb hovering over the screen. For a moment, I thought he might answer. Instead, he slid the device onto silent and dropped it back into the cup holder. "They will want explanations," I said. "They are not owed one right now," he answered. We rode the rest of the way home, draped in the kind of quiet that carries too many words unsaid. My mind kept drifting back to the boy's voice at the back of the church. Kalen, the way his sentence broke in the middle like he was standing on a cracking floor. "If he leaves, everything ends." Those words sat in the back of my thoughts, picking up weight with every mile. Corin pulled into my driveway and put the car in park. For a long moment, he didn't move, just rested his forehead against the top of the steering wheel. "You all right to go inside?" he asked. "I'm not sure what that means yet," I said, "but I can walk." He almost smiled at that, just a small tug at one corner of his mouth. We got out together. The house looked the same as it had when we left it that morning. Same porch, same door, different world. By the time I slipped my shoes off in the hallway, the calls had turned into messages. The phone buzzed against the table near the couch, vibrating its way toward the edge as if trying to escape the weight of all those missed attempts. Corin picked it up at last, thumb moving across the screen, eyes scanning. His face tightened, then loosened, then went blank in that careful way people use when something hits too close. He turned the screen toward me. It was not Dorothy this time. It was one message from Talia. "Please, talk to me." That text from Talia sat on the table between us like an open door into the past. "Please, talk to me." I stared at the words until they blurred, and instead of the quiet living room, I saw the first place where all of this really started. A little bridal boutique on the other side of town. The day my absence opened the door for Dorothy to step in. I work for a clinic that never seems to sleep. Back then, we were short-staffed, and overtime was not a choice but a rhythm. When the appointment reminder pinged my phone that afternoon, first dress fitting, 3 p.m., I was standing over a patient file with a supervisor watching my every move. I checked the time, checked the waiting room, and felt my stomach sink. I called Talia on my break, the phone balanced between my ear and shoulder, my voice low in the staff hallway. "Baby, they just added 2 more patients to my list," I told her. "There's no way I can make it across town by 3. I can try to push for another fitting date." She was quiet for a beat, then let out a little breath. "It's okay," she said. "Mom's already here with me. We'll FaceTime you." Relief mixed with something that did not feel like relief at all. They propped the phone up on a chair, and I watched through a grainy screen while Talia stepped out of the dressing room in white. Dorothy stood beside her, hand at her mouth, eyes shining in the mirror like she had been waiting for this moment all her life. "Oh, my baby," Dorothy said, touching a bit of lace at Talia's shoulder. "Look at you. This is the one." I smiled because it was the right thing to do, even as my throat tightened. "You look beautiful, Talia," I said. "Corin is going to freeze when he sees you." Dorothy adjusted the veil herself, shifting the fabric like it belonged to her. "We'll handle these fittings, Liv," she said, her tone light, using the nickname she had decided on without asking. "You just focus on your work. We've got this part." It sounded kind. It also closed a door I hadn't agreed to shut. After that, the small duties began to stack themselves into a wall. Cake tastings scheduled for weekday afternoons, venue walkthroughs at 10 in the morning, vendor meetings during hours I was bent over charts and blood pressure cuffs. Every time I apologized, Talia had the same answer. "Mom's already going," she would say. "You'll see everything at the rehearsal. Don't stress, okay?" In the group chat they made for the wedding, Harrington Morissette Forever, Dorothy's messages started showing up more often than mine. Little notes to the planner, decisions on centerpieces, final say on the menu when the caterer sent over 3 options and asked for input. "I think we should go with the seafood station," she typed once. "Corin said he liked that at a party last year." I stared at the message for a long time. I had been at that party with him. He had liked the seafood because I had picked it out. I started to type a reply, then deleted it and put the phone face down. The first time I really felt the shift was at the cake tasting I managed to attend. I switched shifts with a younger nurse and arrived a little late, the bell over the bakery door chiming softly as I walked in. Talia and Dorothy were already at a small table, plates of samples in front of them, laughing over something the baker had said. "There she is," the baker smiled, wiping her hands on an apron. "The other mother of the groom." Dorothy laughed along, reaching out to touch my arm. "She's the working one," she told the baker. "I'm the one they've got running all over town." She said it like a joke, but there was a glint at the edge of her smile. Talia chuckled, shaking her head. "Mom has basically been my wedding manager," she said. "Corin trusts her with everything." The baker nodded, already turning to Dorothy for confirmation about the filling. "Red velvet with cream cheese?" he asked her. "That's what we landed on, right?" Dorothy didn't look at me before she answered. "Yes, that's what we decided," she replied. "He likes when I bring that from here." We sat, and I tasted the same cake I had introduced to my son years ago on a birthday when money was tight and celebration was a miracle we had fought for. No one in that room knew that part of the story but me. The more errands Dorothy handled, the more comfortable she became, making decisions in rooms I wasn't in. When I arrived at the venue walkthrough, she was already there with the coordinator, pointing to the aisle, discussing chair placement. "Corin said he wants his mother on the front row, of course," the coordinator said, nodding toward me. Dorothy smiled and answered before I could. "He knows I'll make sure everything is perfect for him," she said. "He respects me more than her." The morning of the wedding, I decided I would not be the woman on the screen anymore. No more grainy FaceTime squares. No more, "we'll send you pictures later." No more catching up on decisions that already had signatures on them. I pressed my palms flat on my dresser, looked at myself in the mirror, and chose a version of me that belonged nowhere but in that front pew. I wore a deep teal dress that folded softly at the waist. The one Corin once said made me look like I owned every room I stepped into. I wrapped my hair the way my mother used to wrap hers for important days, pinned my earrings on with steady fingers, and slipped into low heels that respected my age but still carried a little pride. When I stepped out of the rideshare in front of the church, A chill ran up my arms even though the air was warm. The building rose in front of me, dressed in flowers and white ribbons, the door propped open like a mouth ready to swallow everyone's future. Guests moved in small clusters outside, adjusting ties, fixing lipstick, smiling for photos. Heads turned as I walked past. Some people nodded. One older woman touched my arm and told me I looked beautiful. Inside, the smell of polished wood and fresh flowers settled around me. A coordinator with a clipboard hurried over, checked my name, and brightened. "Mrs. Harrington, perfect timing," she said. "Your son is in the back with the groomsmen. We'll seat you in the front row just before the processional." Hearing it said aloud, front row tucked something back into place inside me. I found Corin in a small side room with his friends and one of his uncles. He was already in his suit, jacket unbuttoned, bow tie hanging loosened around his neck like it was waiting for the right moment to tighten. When he saw me in the doorway, his whole face changed. The stiffness from earlier in the week melted, and he crossed the room in 3 long steps. "Ma," he breathed, pulling me into a hug. His arms wrapped fully around me, not careful, not halfway, like he needed the reminder of where he came from. He leaned back, looked me up and down, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Now that's my mother," he said. "You look like you built this place." The words slid into the emptiest parts of me and filled them. "I wanted you to see me today," I said. He nodded, eyes soft. "I always see you," he answered. The coordinator appeared again, apologizing softly as she reminded him of timing. I stepped back, let them fuss with his tie, and slipped out before I stole too much of his moment. The bride's quarters sat on the other side of the hallway. Inside, voices rose and fell over the hiss of a steamer and the rustle of satin. I paused at the threshold, knocked lightly, and stepped in when someone called out. Talia stood in front of a full-length mirror in her gown, veil lifted. She looked lovely in that way young brides look glowing from the belief that the future will bend in their favor. Dorothy hovered behind her, adjusting the train, smoothing imaginary wrinkles, her face serious with purpose. When they caught sight of me, something shifted in the room. "Wow," Talia said, turning fully. "You look really nice, Miss Olivet." Dorothy's eyes moved over me, quick and measuring. For a heartbeat, I saw calculation there, the way a person looks at a chair they thought was reserved for them alone. "You clean up good," she said, forcing a small smile. "I almost didn't recognize you out of your scrubs." The words landed light but carried an edge. "I took the day off," I replied. "Told them I have somewhere important to be." Talia's lips twitched like she wanted to smile at that, but her eyes flicked toward her mother first. Checking her expression before deciding how much approval she could show, Dorothy moved back to the dress, fingers busy, voice brisk. "Everything has been handled," she said, more to herself than to me. "Programs, flowers, playlists. He doesn't have to worry about a thing." There was pride in her tone, the kind that grows from weeks of being the one everyone runs to with questions. I watched her for a moment, the way she straightened the veil, the way she gave the stylist small corrections, the way she stood close enough to Talia to almost blend into her reflection. "You did a lot," I said. "Thank you for taking care of her." Dorothy's shoulders lifted, just a little. "Someone had to," she replied. "Not unkind, not kind either. You've been busy." It stung, but I let it pass. Today was not the day to tally every time my overtime shifts had turned into an accusation. Later, when we all moved into the sanctuary and took our places, I felt the weight of her gaze as I walked down the aisle to my seat. The coordinator guided me right to the front row, on the groom's side, center. As I sat, I could feel Dorothy watching from across the aisle, hands gripping her clutch a little tighter. Months of errands and decisions had built a throne for her in her own mind, and my presence nudged it an inch to the side. As the music began and the bridesmaids floated in, Dorothy leaned toward Talia, lips at her ear. I saw her say something I could not hear. Talia's shoulders shook with a small laugh, quick and mean at the edges. Dorothy straightened then, turned her face toward me. What I saw in her eyes in that moment did not feel like simple dislike. It carried something else, fear, hunger, a wild need to hold on to the importance she had claimed. I did not have a name for it yet. I just knew it was about to break something none of us could quietly fix. The house felt too small for the day we had dragged into it. I closed the front door behind us, and the quiet rushed in, thick and heavy, filling corners that usually held softer things: music from the radio, the clink of dishes, the low murmur of the evening news. I slipped my shoes off by the mat, like it was any other day, and they landed in a row that suddenly looked like they belonged to a stranger. Corin walked past me into the living room, loosened his tie, and dropped it over the back of a chair. The jacket followed, folded once, laid across the armrest. He moved slowly, like his body wanted to fall, but his mind wouldn't let it. The sunlight coming through the window brushed the side of his face, catching the places where the calm didn't quite reach. He lowered himself onto the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped loosely. I stood there for a moment, unsure whether to sit beside him or give him space. All my life with him, I had been the one to walk into his room after something broke: a toy, a friendship, a promise, and now the break was too large for any room to hold. I chose the chair across from him and sat down, palms resting flat on my thighs. The coffee table between us felt like a tiny border, separating a man from the boy I still saw under his eyes. The phone lay where he had left it, face down on the table. It had stopped vibrating on the ride home, as if the battery had given up before they did. Now it sat silent, but silence did not mean peace. Silence only meant there were more words waiting somewhere we couldn't hear yet. "I can make some tea," I said. "Or coffee." He shook his head without looking up. "I don't want anything right now," he said. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to be noticed. Outside, a car passed, bass line thumping through the glass, a reminder that somewhere people were celebrating Saturdays like they always did. In our house, the day had split into a before and an after. "I didn't mean for you to lose everything today," I said, the words coming out slower than I planned. "I know how much you invested in that relationship." He finally lifted his head. His eyes were tired, but not wild. There was a steadiness there that made my chest ache and settle at the same time. "I didn't lose everything," he said. "I cut off what was going to poison everything else." He leaned back against the couch, arms spreading along the top. He looked like a man taking up space in his own life, not a boy needing comfort. "I can't invest myself where my mother isn't respected," he said. The sentence hung in the room, heavy and clean. No anger, no drama, just a boundary laid down so clearly the air had to rearrange itself around it. Something behind my ribs loosened and tightened in the same breath. For years, I had told myself that my place in his life would naturally dim as other people stepped in: teachers, mentors, a partner with her own family and ways. I had been prepared to be background as long as he was loved. I had not expected him to pull me back to the front row with a single choice. "You don't have to do all of this for me," I said softly. "I have lived through worse than a woman's careless words." He shook his head again, more firmly this time. "This is not about you surviving," he replied. "This is about what I am willing to accept from anybody." He reached for the phone then, turned it over, and woke the screen. Messages lined up in a vertical column, Talia's text near the top, followed by others from numbers I recognized and some I didn't. Missed calls, voicemails, a photo someone had sent from inside the church after we left. He scrolled once, his mouth tightening at something only he could see. Then he locked the phone and set it back down, this time with care. "Everything I am," he began, then stopped, searching for the right weight. His eyes came back to me and stayed there. "Everything I am is because of you, Mom." The words slid through me, slow and deep. I had heard him thank me before. Small things, restaurant bills, help when he moved into his first apartment. But this was not the same. This was him standing in the middle of his own life and pointing a line straight back to my front door. "You worked those late shifts," he continued. "You took on extra hours so I didn't have to pick between school and rent. You told me to be generous, but you never told me to be blind. I won't let anyone use what I built with you as a weapon against you." Heat pricked behind my eyes. I blinked it away. Crying now would turn this into something else, and I wanted him to have the clarity he had earned. "So what happens now?" I asked. He leaned forward, forearms on his knees again, fingers laced together. When he spoke, his voice was calm, in that way people use when they have already walked their decision around inside their mind and found no other doorway. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'm stepping back from every tie I have with that family." I didn't sleep much that night. The house sat under a quiet that felt heavier than any storm. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that church door closing, saw my son's back as he walked away from a life he had been planning in full color. By morning, my body was tired, but my mind was sharp. Some days come to collect every unpaid truth you've been walking around. This was one of them. I was at the stove when I heard his footsteps. The kettle was already on, eggs cooling in a bowl of water, toast waiting by the cutting board. I reached for 2 mugs out of habit. No matter how grown your child gets, some rituals don't retire. "Morning," he said, voice low, rubbing the back of his neck as he came into the kitchen. I glanced at him. The suit was gone, replaced by a plain t-shirt and sweatpants, but the weight in his eyes hadn't changed. "Sit down," I told him. "Food won't fix everything, but it keeps your legs under you while you think." He smiled a little and did as I said. I set a plate in front of him, then one in front of myself, and we ate in the kind of silence that means both people are gathering the right words. "You remember that first office you rented?" I said finally. "The one over the laundromat." He looked up, surprised, then nodded. "Smelled like fabric softener every time it rained," he said. "You didn't have enough for first and last month's rent," I reminded him. "You came to my bedroom door with those papers in your hand and your shoulders trying to hide how scared you were." He leaned back in his chair, eyes turning softer. "I remember," he said. "You went into that old coffee tin in your closet. It wasn't much. Tips I'd tucked away from extra shifts, a refund check I hadn't cashed yet, the kind of money most people would say wasn't spare at all. I poured it into his hands anyway, every bill a piece of a future I could only see in faith. You told me if I lost it, we'd both be broke," he added, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "I told you if you lost it, we'd both get back up," I corrected, "because that's what we do." He nodded slowly. That office above the laundromat turned into contracts. The contracts turned into clients. He started with logistics for small shops, then deliveries, then warehouse coordination. I watched him build something steady from a desk that shook every time the machines downstairs hit their spin cycle. "I used to come home and see that light under your door," I said. 2, 3 in the morning. You'd be in there at that little folding table, reading those books about business and money like they were Bibles. "You were coming home that late because of those double shifts," he said quietly. I never forgot that part. The clinic had its own demands, night shifts that stretched into mornings, holiday schedules nobody wanted. I took them because somebody had to, and because my boy had a dream that needed more than love to get off the ground. I would peel my shoes off at the door, lean on the frame, and listen to him on the phone with vendors, with drivers, with people who didn't know they were talking to a man whose mother still packed his leftovers into reused margarine tubs. "You taught me discipline," he went on. "Get up when you're tired. Show up when you don't feel like it. Keep your word, even when the money's late." "You learned to keep your head when other folks lost theirs," I said. "I just pointed." He shook his head. "You didn't just point," he said. "You stopped me from signing that first bad contract. You told me to read the part with the smallest letters twice." I remembered that night too, the way he had slid the papers across the table, proud and in a hurry, and the way my stomach had clenched when I saw the clause that would have pinned him to one company for years for almost nothing. I had circled it in red pen, pushed it back, and told him, "Nothing that traps you is a blessing, no matter how shiny it looks." "You gave me your savings," he said. "You gave me your time. You gave me your common sense when I was about to trade it in for applause." He let the words sit there. They didn't float, they landed. "I helped," I said, "but you did the work." He looked at me in that steady way again. "I did the work because you showed me how to work," he answered. "All this?" He gestured lightly toward the window, where his car sat in the driveway, where the world outside knew his name now in ways it used to overlook mine. "None of this exists without you." We sat there, 2 plates between us, the past laid out as clearly as the breakfast. It hurt a little, seeing it all lined up like that, the long nights, the early mornings, the times I had gone without so he wouldn't have to. It hurt, but it was the good kind of hurt, the kind that comes from stretching a truth that's been cramped too long. He reached for his phone, turning it over in his hand, thumb resting near the side like he was tempted to turn it back on. "I've poured into a lot of people because of what you put in me," he said, her family included. He let that hang, then set the phone down without unlocking it. His eyes met mine, no hesitation in them. "No one insults the woman who built me," he said. By 8 that morning, my son had turned his heartbreak into a checklist. That was how I knew he wasn't moving from pain alone. Pain wanders. This was direction. I stood in the hallway for a moment, watching him at the dining table. He had pulled his laptop out, set his phone beside it, a legal pad in front of him, no coffee yet, no breakfast. Just that look he got when he was about to untangle a mess other people thought would swallow them whole. "Morning," I said, stepping into the room. "Morning, Ma," he answered, eyes still on the screen. "You sleep any?" "Enough to stand up," I replied. He exhaled through his nose, a small sound that might have been a tired laugh on a better day. "You don't have to sit through this," he said. "It's not going to be pretty." "I sat through the building," I told him. "I can sit through the cutting loose." He nodded once and turned his attention back to the laptop. The first email he typed was slower than the rest. I could see him weighing every word. "That one to your lawyer?" I asked. "To my HR director," he said. "Dorothy's position was always marked temporary while we figured out a permanent structure. I told them last month to start sketching the restructure. I'm just not delaying it anymore." He wasn't adding anything new, just removing the cushion of time he'd given them. His fingers moved carefully over the keys. He didn't write anything cruel, just facts. The project winding down. The role no longer needed. A meeting to discuss transition. He read it over twice before hitting send. "That's her job?" I asked quietly. "That's the job I gave her," he corrected. "She still has every skill she walked in with. She just won't be carrying my name into that building anymore." He made a note on his pad, crossing off the first line. Next came a call. He put it on speaker, his voice steady as he spoke to his banker, asking to stop the automatic transfers he'd been making toward a house note that didn't have his name on the deed. No anger, no explanation beyond a change in arrangement. "When is the next payment due?" he asked. "In a few days," the man on the other end replied. "Stop mine before it hits," Corin said. "They'll manage their side." He ended the call and sat back, rolling the pen between his fingers. "You sure about that?" I asked. "I was sure yesterday," he said. "Today I'm just acting on it." The next call went to a man named Reggie, one of his senior managers. They talked about the small joint venture he'd set up with Talia's father, a modest trucking line he'd co-signed for, more as a favor than a business necessity. "I'm pulling my backing out," Corin said simply. "Give him the numbers. Let him decide if he wants to keep it afloat on his own or wind it down." "You two all right?" Reggie asked carefully. "We're not family anymore," Corin replied. "Just make sure the paperwork is clean." He ended that call quicker. It hurt a little more to watch, not because of the money, but because I knew how much he liked helping people stand on their feet. Between each move, he paused. Not long. Just enough to make sure he was cutting what needed cutting and not reaching for anything out of spite. I could feel him checking his own spirit, the way a man checks a door lock twice before leaving the house. "This isn't revenge," I said. "You know that, right?" "I'm not punishing them," he replied. "I'm just stepping out of places I no longer belong." He opened a folder on his laptop that held scholarship information, a list of names, amounts, schools. At the top of one column, I saw K. Morissette and the name of a university overseas. Tuition numbers that would have scared me once now sat there as lines he covered with his palm. "That one is him?" I asked. "Kalen," he said. "He was supposed to start his second year next term." His thumb tapped lightly against the table. He didn't act on it yet. He just let the reality sit there. His phone buzzed then, breaking the rhythm. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's not her," he said before I could ask. "It's him." He slid his finger across to open the message and read it silently, his eyes moving slower than before. The muscles in his jaw tightened, then softened. He handed me the phone. "Mr. Harrington." I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything after what happened yesterday. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I never disrespected your mother and I never will. Thank you for everything you've done for me so far. Whatever you decide next. No emojis, no begging, just that." "He didn't laugh," I murmured. "He sounded scared in that church." "He sounded honest now," Corin said. He took the phone back, stared at the message a long moment. I could see the fight in him, not between anger and softness, but between principle and mercy. He had drawn a clean line for the people who hurt me. Now he was staring at someone who hadn't, caught in the blast of what his last name used to provide. "What are you going to do?" I asked. He set the phone down beside the laptop, not answering yet. His thumb rested near the edge, like it might reach back for the screen at any second. His gaze stayed fixed on that one name in the scholarship folder. "I meant what I said about stepping back," he murmured. "But I might make one exception." By Monday afternoon, the cuts he made that morning started to land in other people's lives. I saw it first in the way his phone stopped buzzing with calls from offices and started flashing the same names from the same house. They weren't business calls anymore. They were impact calls. He kept most of them on silent. But the world doesn't stay quiet just because you decide you're done with someone. News travels on its own legs. His HR director called to confirm the restructuring memo had been received and logged. The bank sent a formal notice acknowledging the cancellation of his portion of the mortgage transfer. His manager texted him about the trucking venture, letting him know Talia's father had gone silent after hearing the numbers he would have to carry alone. Corin read each message, nodded, and put the phone down. There was no smile in it, no satisfaction, just a man watching a building he'd been holding up finally stand on its own weight or sink under it. I didn't see what happened inside the Morissette house with my own eyes, but people talk when their world starts cracking, and sometimes they talk to the very person who helped weaken the floor. Some of it I heard later from Kaylin, some of it from Talia, and the hardest part straight from Dorothy when she finally came to sit in front of me with nothing left to hide behind. When the email about the job restructuring hit Dorothy's inbox, she was still in yesterday's heels. She had not slept. The subject line carried his company's name, her title, and the word transition. It said everything without shouting. The project she managed was concluding ahead of schedule. Her position would sunset as part of strategic realignment. There was a meeting invitation attached to discuss severance and next steps. She read it once, then again, then printed it like paper would change the meaning. The job she had wrapped around herself like a new skin had been peeled away with a paragraph she couldn't argue with. An hour later, her husband opened his banking app and saw the mortgage draft schedule. For months, part of that number had come from a source that didn't live under their roof. Now the screen showed only their portion, full and uninterested in their feelings. The next due date glared at him. According to what Talia told me later, he turned to Dorothy with a look that held more fear than anger. "You told me this was stable," he said. "You told me he was family." "He is," she insisted, voice already cracking. "He loves our daughter. He wouldn't just walk away from us." Talia stood in the doorway, veil gone, makeup wiped off in streaks that still clung to the edges of her lashes. She listened to them argue over numbers that had her name written between every line and felt something close to nausea climb her throat. "You called his mother a disaster," she finally said. "In front of everyone? You think that doesn't count for anything?" Dorothy swung her head toward her, eyes wide. "I was upset," she snapped. "I have done everything for this wedding. I made sure you had the dress, the flowers, the venue. I carried this whole thing on my back. Anyone would have snapped. And I laughed," Talia answered, voice flat. "I laughed right along with you." The words didn't free her. They chained her to it. The real crack came later that afternoon when an email landed in Callan's inbox. It came from the scholarship office at his university, confirming funds for the upcoming term. The amount matched what he had always received. There was a note at the bottom. Support will continue under current terms unless the student chooses to withdraw. He read it twice before walking into the kitchen where his mother sat with her head in her hands. "So he kept mine," Kaylin said quietly. "He kept me on." Dorothy lifted her face, eyes swollen. "What do you mean?" she asked. "The scholarship," he said, holding up his phone. He didn't cut mine. Her husband leaned back in his chair, exhaling like someone had opened a window. Relief passed over his face for a second before settling into something harder. "So he can still afford generosity," he muttered. "He just chose to pull it from us. He chose not to punish me for something I didn't do," Kaylin replied, shoulders stiffening. "I was the only one in that room who didn't open my mouth." Tension shifted then. It stopped floating and landed squarely on Dorothy's shoulders. "You brought him into this house," Talia said, eyes burning. "You pushed and pushed, treated his mother like she was an afterthought, and now I don't have a fiancé and you don't have a job." "Watch your tone," Dorothy fired back, but it came out thinner than she meant. Callan shook his head slowly. "He asked for one thing," he said. "Respect his mother. You couldn't do it for one day." The sentence cut deeper than any insult that had left her own mouth. Her children weren't just scared now, they were holding her responsible, and they weren't wrong. Later, when she sat across from me and told me all this, her hands shook so hard she had to wrap them around her coffee cup just to keep them still. "I thought he needed us," she said. "The parties, the connections, the way we make people feel important. I never realized we were the ones standing on what he built." She stared down at the table, her voice dropping. "They're both looking at me like I broke their lives," she whispered. "And maybe I did." For a long moment, all I heard was the small clink of her spoon against the ceramic. "I need to apologize," she said finally, lifting her eyes to mine. "To both of them. It was 2 days after the wedding that never happened when he told me he was going to see her. He stood in my doorway with his keys in his hand, not dressed up, not dressed down, just in that neutral way people choose when they don't want their clothes to carry any message. She asked to talk," he said, "in person, somewhere public." "Do you want me there?" I asked. He thought about it for a breath, then nodded toward the living room window. "If you want to sit where you can see the door, I won't stop you," he said, "but I need to be the one to answer her." We met at a small cafe tucked off a side street, one of those places with big windows and small tables, the kind that never gets loud enough to drown out your own thoughts. I took a seat by the window with a cup of tea I didn't really want. From there, I could see most of the room without being in the middle of anything. Corin arrived first. He chose a table near the back, against the wall, where he could see the entrance. He sat with his hands folded, elbow on the table, shoulders relaxed on purpose. I knew that posture. It was how he sat with clients who wanted something he wasn't sure he should give. Talia came in a few minutes later. No makeup this time, no gown, just jeans, a simple blouse, and a face that looked like it had met too many mirrors and not enough sleep. She spotted him, hesitated, then walked over. She slid into the chair across from him, fingers knotted around the strap of her bag. For a moment, they didn't speak. The cafe's low music and clinking cups filled the space between them, but it did not soften it. "Thank you for coming," she said finally. Her voice was small but clear. He nodded. "You asked," he replied. "I thought it was fair to hear you." She swallowed, eyes fixed on the table. "I won't take long," she said. "I know you don't owe me that." He waited. He didn't rush her, didn't offer her any words to make it easier. If she had something to say, she would have to lift it herself. "I laughed," she said. "You heard it. They heard it. I've heard it in my own head every night since." Her fingers picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. "It wasn't funny," she went on. "I know that. It wasn't a joke. It was me being small. Me letting my mother's way of talking become mine without thinking what it meant. She's always been dramatic. She snaps, then she smooths things over. I grew up watching it. I thought that was just how people handled tension." She lifted her eyes then, first to his face, then over his shoulder, where she caught sight of me at the window. Our eyes met for a second, and she didn't look away. "I was wrong," she said. "You were right to walk away from that." Her gaze came back to him. "I disrespected your mother," she said, steady now. "I stood there and let her be hurt in front of everyone, and I added to it. That's not who I want to be. It doesn't matter how stressed I was or what my mother was whispering in my ear. I own what I did." The words were plain. No excuses, no tears rolling down cheeks like they had a job to do. Her voice trembled once, but she held it. Corin listened with his jaw relaxed, eyes steady. He didn't flinch, didn't rush to patch anything. When she finished, he sat with it for a moment, letting the apology breathe. "Thank you for saying that," he said at last. Her shoulders dropped, not in relief, but in acknowledgement that at least the words had found somewhere to land. "I loved you," she said quietly. "Part of me still does. That's the truth. But I understand why you did what you did. I just didn't want the last thing between us to be that look on your face when you walked out." He leaned back slightly, arms crossing on his chest, not defensively, just as if he needed to hold his own center. "I cared about you," he said. "I don't erase that. You're not a stranger to me. But I meant what I said in that church. I cannot build a life with someone who can stand in a room and watch my mother be torn down like that." She nodded, lips pressing together. "I let influence speak louder than my own values," she said, "and I hurt you and her. I'm sorry, Corin, not for losing the wedding, for how I lost you." His eyes softened at that, just a fraction. "I forgive you," he said. The words were simple, clean. They did not come with a promise attached, just release. She blinked, and this time a tear did slip free. She brushed it away with the heel of her hand before it could fall fully. "Forgiveness doesn't mean we go back," he added. "It doesn't mean I put you in that position again, or myself, or my mother. It just means I'm not going to carry anger for you." She nodded again, more quickly now, breathing through it like someone trying to stand through a wave instead of letting it knock them down. "I understand," she said. "Even if it hurts, I understand." For a moment, they just sat there, two people with a future behind them instead of ahead. The cafe hummed around them, unaware of the history sitting at that small table. Her hand moved toward her bag, then stopped halfway. She looked at him, eyes searching his face like she was trying to memorize it without permission. "Can we ever be anything again?" she whispered. He didn't answer. When he told me he was going to see Dorothy, there was no anger in his voice, just that same steady resolve that had been carrying him through each decision. He stood in the doorway of my kitchen, hand on the frame, as if he wasn't sure whether to step all the way in or stay half in his own thoughts. "She asked to talk," he said. "Just me and her this time." I wiped my hands on a dish towel and looked at him. "You sure you're ready for that?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I'm not going back on anything," he said, "but I'm not running from anything either." He told me the place she'd chosen, a quiet corner of a hotel lobby cafe near her old office. Neutral ground, public enough for safety, private enough for truth. I didn't offer to go with him. Talia had needed to see him alone. Dorothy needed to face him without me in the room as a shield or a weapon. "Say what you need to say," I told him. "Listen to what you can. Leave what you can't." He leaned down, kissed my forehead like he did when he was little and thought that made things better, then left. Later, when he came back, he sat at my table and told me what happened. Not all at once. In pieces, the way you lay out broken glass so you don't cut yourself picking it up. "She looked different," he said, fingers tracing the rim of his glass. Smaller, like someone had taken air out of her. He found her sitting at a table near the back, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. No makeup this time either. Hair pulled back, clothes neat but tired. The kind of tired that didn't come from a long day, but from too many days stacked on top of each other without rest. "Corin," she said when he approached, standing halfway before thinking better of it and sinking back down. He sat across from her, keeping his back straight, his expression neutral. "Thank you for coming," she added. He didn't offer anything to soften the moment. "You asked," he said. "I figured you wanted to say something that didn't belong in a text." She nodded, swallowed, and stared at the coffee like the words might rise up out of the steam that wasn't there anymore. "I'm not going to ask you to change anything you've done," she said finally. "Not the job, not the house, not the business. I know those doors are shut." He stayed quiet. "I don't have excuses," she went on. "I have reasons, but they don't make what I did any less ugly, so I'm not going to bother dressing them up." She lifted her eyes slowly, meeting his. "I liked being needed," she said. "That's where it started. The calls from planners, the vendors, the people asking me what you would want, what your fiancé would want. I got used to hearing, "Ask Dorothy." I started thinking that meant I was important. Her mouth twisted around the word like it had turned sour. "When your mother couldn't make it to things, I told myself I was filling a gap," she said. "I told myself I was helping you, helping Talia. And then somewhere along the way, I stopped being grateful to be included and started acting like it all belonged to me." He watched her, hands folded, giving her nothing to lean on. "I mistook being needed for being better," she admitted. "And when your mother showed up, all calm and beautiful and in her proper place, I felt something ugly grab hold of me, like if I didn't prove I still mattered, I would disappear." She swallowed again, eyes shining now, but she blinked the tears back before they fell. "I didn't hate your mother," she said quietly. "I wanted to matter, and I thought making myself bigger meant making her smaller." The line sat between them, naked and heavy. "You called her a disaster," he reminded her. "In front of me, in front of everyone." She nodded, shame dragging the motion low. "I did," she said. "And I have heard myself saying that in my own head every day since. It sounded different in that church than it did in my mind before it came out." She glanced down, then back up. "My daughter doesn't have a fiancé because I couldn't control my tongue," she said. "My son looks at me like I knocked the floor out from under him. My husband keeps checking our account like numbers are going to rearrange themselves if he stares long enough." She took a shaky breath. "You were good to us," she said. "I know that. The job, the mortgage help, the business, the scholarship, you carried more than you had to. And I treated your mother like she was in the way." He let her sit in that acknowledgement. "No rescue, no extra cruelty. You're not asking for me to put anything back," he said slowly. "I don't have the right to ask you for that," she replied. "You pulled back what was yours. You're entitled to your peace." She lifted her hands then, palms up, as if to show she was not hiding anything. "All I'm asking for is a chance to say I'm sorry to the person I hurt most," she said. "To her, and to you, with her sitting there so I can't pretend she isn't real." He studied her face. There was no performance in it now, no audience to impress, just a woman who had discovered that the importance she built her pride on was standing on someone else's foundation. "I can't promise you how she'll receive it," he said. "I don't need a promise," she answered. "I need the chance." She pressed her lips together, then spoke the words that brought that conversation to my doorway later that day. "Can I meet with your mother?" she asked. By the time I pushed open the glass door of the hotel cafe, she was already there. Same table in the corner that he'd told me about, same cup of coffee sitting in front of her, going cold while she waited. Dorothy looked up when the door closed behind me, and for a second, I saw two women instead of one, the one who had shouted in that church, and the one whose shoulders now slumped like gravity had found new places to pull. "Thank you for coming, Miss Harrington," she said, standing halfway, then settling back down as if she remembered she didn't know whether she had earned the right to stand fully in front of me. I took the chair across from her, laid my purse in my lap, and rested my hands on top of it. "You already sat with me once and told me how your house fell apart," I said. "You said today you wanted to talk about something else." She nodded, fingers tightening around the mug. "Today I'm here to talk about what I did to you," she said quietly. The cafe was slow for that hour. A couple in business clothes talked over laptops near the window. A man in a suit scrolled through his phone at the bar. The light was soft, the music low, like the room understood it was standing in the middle of something fragile. Dorothy took a breath that shuddered a little on the way out. "I was wrong," she said. "In that church, in the weeks leading up to it, in the way I talked about you when you weren't around." She met my eyes and forced herself to hold them. "You are not a disaster," she said. "You are a mother who did the work I never had to do. You carried him without help. You gave him chances I didn't know how to give my own children. And I stood up in front of everyone and tried to tear that down so I could feel bigger." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't break into drama. It stayed low and steady, the sound of someone walking through their own wreckage piece by piece. "I liked being needed," she went on. "It made me feel useful, important. When people started calling me for every wedding decision, I let it climb into my head. I forgot that I was supposed to be filling in, not replacing anyone." She looked down at her hands. "I told myself you were too busy," she said. "That you'd already had your time as the mother, that this was my turn. And when you walked into that church looking like you belonged to the whole front row, I felt something ugly, like I was being pushed away from a stage I'd convinced myself I earned." I let the words sit there. They didn't surprise me. They confirmed what I had already felt, a woman clinging to a role that never truly belonged to her. "You hurt me," I said quietly, "but you didn't undo me." She nodded quickly, tears brightening the rims of her eyes. "I know," she whispered. "I see that now. You were solid even when I tried to make you shake." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, Olivette," she said, using my name properly for the first time. "For the insult, for the way I treated your absence like an invitation to erase you, for making your son choose between peace for you and comfort for us." Her apology didn't come dressed in excuses. It didn't bring up what I hadn't done. It stayed on what she had. That mattered. "I can't take back what you lost," she added, "but I don't want you walking around thinking I hated you. I envied you. I wanted to matter half as much as you do in his life, and I went about it the wrong way." For a moment, I thought about all those nights I had dragged myself home from the clinic while she sat in bakeries and boutiques with my would-be daughter-in-law, all the little comments, all the choices she'd made in rooms I never saw. And I thought about that same woman sitting at this table now, stripped of the job he'd given her, the help he'd extended, the easy confidence she used to wrap around herself like a shawl. "You matter to your children," I said. "You always did. You just couldn't see it from where you were standing." Her lip trembled, but she held herself together. "I would like to earn back their respect," she said. "I don't expect to earn back yours, but I needed you to hear me say it out loud." I nodded once. "I accept your apology," I said. "That's what I can give you today." At that moment, I felt him before I saw him. Corin's shadow slid across our table as he approached, and Dorothy straightened instinctively. He pulled up a chair beside me, sitting at a slight angle so he faced both of us. "Ma," he said softly. Then to Dorothy, "You said you wanted her here too." Dorothy clasped her hands together, fingers interlaced so tight the knuckles went white. "I told your mother the same thing I told you," she said. "I don't have a right to ask you to undo anything. I just wanted to say I see how wrong I was, and to thank you for not cutting my son off when you pulled back from us." Corin watched her carefully. "Kaylin didn't do anything to my mother," he said. "He shouldn't pay for what grown people decided to do with their mouths." A breath of relief left her chest. "I'm grateful you see that," she whispered. He nodded once. "I forgive you," he said. Her eyes closed for a second, as if the words physically passed through her. When she opened them, they were wet but clear. "But forgiveness," he continued, "doesn't mean going back to how things were. You won't be working under me again. You won't have your hands in my personal life. Those lines stay where I put them." She accepted it without arguing. "I understand," she said. He leaned back slightly. "I do know someone," he added, "a colleague who's looking for someone with your experience. I can pass your name along. After that, it's between you and them. No favors, no ties to me." For a moment, she just stared at him, as if she couldn't quite believe he was still willing to do anything on her behalf. "That's more than I deserve," she said. "It's not about what you deserve," he replied. "It's about who I am. My mother raised me to help where I can without losing myself." He reached for his phone, made a quick note, then set it aside. The three of us sat there in a quiet that felt different from the one in my living room after the wedding. This silence didn't carry wreckage. It carried a kind of fragile rebuilding. I glanced toward the window, more out of habit than anything else, and saw a familiar figure just outside the glass. Talia stood on the sidewalk, hands tucked into her sleeves, eyes fixed on our table. She took one small step toward the door, then stopped. The bell above the cafe door made the smallest sound when she finally came in. If I hadn't already seen her standing outside the window, I might have missed it. Talia stepped over the threshold slowly, as if the floor might move under her feet. No bride today. Just a young woman in a plain dress and a thin cardigan, fingers wrapped tight around the strap of her bag. Her eyes went to her mother first. Dorothy's back stiffened, then softened, like she was bracing for one kind of moment and getting another. Then Talia looked at me, and I watched every layer of pride and performance fall off her face one by one. "Miss Olivette," she said, voice quiet but clear. She didn't sit. She came to the side of the table and stood there, not too close, not too far, hands visible, shoulders lowered. It reminded me of the way nurses approached families after bad news, careful, respectful, knowing words could hurt even when they were meant to heal. "I should have come to you before I asked to see him," she said. "I didn't. I'm fixing that now." My hands stayed folded around my cup. "I'm listening," I told her. Her gaze held mine, and this time she didn't look to her mother for cues. "I disrespected you," she said. "I stood in a room full of people while my mother talked about you like you hadn't done a thing in this world worth honoring, and when she did it, I laughed." She didn't whisper that last part. She let the word sit between us with its full weight. "You didn't deserve that from me," she went on. "You never treated me like anything less than family. You called. You checked on me. You sent food when I was sick. You trusted me with your son's heart. And I stood there and chose my mother's comfort over your dignity." Dorothy's eyes closed briefly at that. Corin sat very still beside me, his attention on Talia but his presence grounding me in the chair. "I'm sorry," Talia said. "Not just as a woman to another woman, but as the woman who was supposed to become your daughter-in-law. I made that day about everything except the one thing it should have been about. Respect." Her throat worked around the last word. "I can't undo what I did," she added, "but I needed you to hear from my own mouth that I know I was wrong. No excuses." Just that. Something eased in my chest, not forgiveness yet, not fully, but the tightness that comes from carrying an injury no one else has named. "You hurt me," I said. "You hurt my son. That's the truth." She nodded, eyes shining. "I know," she whispered. "But I also see you standing here," I said. "You could have stayed outside that glass. You walked in instead." I let my breath out slowly. "I accept your apology," I told her. "What you do with it from here is between you and the woman you want to become." Her shoulders dropped, and for a second she looked younger than she had in that dress before everything went sideways. "Thank you," she said. Only then did she turn fully to Corin. She drew in a breath like she was bracing for a hit that wouldn't leave a mark on her skin, but might leave one on her life. "Corin," she started, then stopped, the name catching briefly. "You've already heard most of this from me. I don't want to pull you through the same words twice." He gave a small nod. "I heard you," he said. "Both times." She pressed her lips together, then tried again. "I loved you," she said. "I still do. That's not going to vanish just because we don't have a date on a calendar anymore. But I understand why you did what you did now in a way I didn't understand that day. I thought you were choosing drama over us. You were choosing your standard." His jaw softened a little. "I can't be angry with you forever," he said. "I won't carry you like that. You made a choice. I made one too." She nodded, absorbing it. "I'm going to work on myself," she said. "Not to get you back, just so I don't show up like that in the next place. I'm trusted." He studied her for a long moment. "I hope you do," he said. "Truly." Silence settled again, gentler this time. "Not empty, just full of things," finally said. "We can't rebuild what broke that day," he added. "But I wish you well." The words were final without being cruel, a benediction over something that wouldn't be resurrected. Her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall all the way. She glanced at me one more time, and I saw gratitude there, and regret, and a softer kind of goodbye than the one we'd been handed in that church. "Let's go, Mama," she said quietly, turning toward Dorothy. Dorothy rose slowly, as if her body had been waiting for that invitation. Talia reached for her mother's hand, fingers threading through, and this time they walked out together. No music, no aisle, no audience, just two women leaving a table where truth had finally been laid down. Time didn't rush after that cafe meeting. It didn't crawl either. It just moved, steady and quiet, giving everyone a chance to live with what they'd done and what had been done to them. Consequences don't slam down all at once. They settle. They find their level. I saw it first in the way Dorothy's voice sounded when she called me a few weeks later. We weren't friends, not like that, but life has a way of turning certain people into permanent footnotes in your story. She asked if she could stop by after work. After work, that was the part that caught my ear. She came to my house in a simple blouse and slacks, the kind that don't belong to a title as much as they belong to a woman who has somewhere to clock in. No flourish, no perfume cloud, just a handbag and tired shoes. "I took the job," she said, standing in my doorway with a small, crooked smile. "The one from your son's contact. I started last Monday." I stepped aside and let her in. "How is it?" I asked. She sat on the edge of my couch, hands on her knees like she didn't trust herself to sink all the way into the cushion. "It's different," she said. "Nobody there knows me as the woman attached to some successful son-in-law. I'm just Dorothy who shows up on time and gets things done." There was no bitterness in it, just an honest kind of humility. "I'm learning to like that," she added softly. We talked a little about hours, about tasks, about the small relief of earning something with her own name. She didn't mention the old job again. Neither did I. Some doors stay shut for a reason. Kalen's updates came in messages he sent to Corin and, sometimes, little notes forwarded to me when my son thought they'd make me smile. Pictures of a campus bench with fall leaves scattered around it. A snapshot of a graded project with a small A at the top. One short line that said, "I won't waste what you kept in place for me." "They're doing better," Corin said one evening, reading a message at my table while I folded laundry. "They're not okay yet, but they're trying." "What about her?" I asked, meaning the one whose name we didn't toss around casually anymore. He tapped his phone once, thinking. "She got a job at a community center," he said. "Program assistant, after-school stuff, workshops." I looked up. "With kids?" "With girls mostly," he said. "She told me she wants to help them build better voices in their own homes than she had in hers. That's what she said anyway." I held a towel in my hands a moment longer than I needed to. "That sounds like work," I murmured. "Real work," he agreed. "The kind that doesn't come with flowers and hashtags." He didn't see her often. A message on holidays. A picture when she graduated from a training course. No late-night talks. No almosts. Just two people acknowledging each other from a respectful distance. Whatever she was building now, she was building without leaning on his name as scaffolding. That mattered. Their household, from what I heard in scattered pieces, was quieter. Still tense some days, still healing. There were arguments when bills came due, when memories resurfaced, when someone's pride flared without warning. But there was also something else now, just a little more honesty. Kalen spoke up when a line was crossed. Talia did too. Even Dorothy, from what she told me, had learned what it meant to say, "I was wrong," before the damage grew teeth. As their side of the story slowly leveled out, mine shifted in its own way. Corin came by more often, not because he needed somewhere to hide, but because he had remembered the ease of being with someone who knew him before the headlines and the contracts. Some nights he brought takeout, dropping it on my counter like an offering. Some mornings he'd show up with coffee and sit at my table while I went over grocery lists and schedules, his presence turning the ordinary into something almost sacred. We didn't talk about the wedding every time. Life is more than the worst day someone hands you. We talked about his drivers, about new routes he was testing, about the young man at his office he was training up for more responsibility. We talked about my clinic, the younger nurses, the patients who reminded me why I still clocked in even when my knees complained about it. Every so often, though, a quiet would pass between us, and I'd catch him looking at me with a softness that had weight to it. "What?" I'd ask. "Nothing," he'd say. "Just glad you're here, that's all." Those were the moments I held on to when the house went quiet after he left. Not the memory of Dorothy's words, not the hush of a church full of witnesses, just my son's voice, warm and grounded, choosing me out loud. Time did what it always does when people stop fighting it. It moved us forward, not so far that we forgot, just far enough that remembering didn't knock the wind out of either of us anymore. One evening, he showed up with his shirt tucked a little too neatly, a folder in his hand and that alertness in his eyes that told me he'd been thinking hard about something before he climbed my steps. "Ma," he said, dropping onto the couch beside me, "I need you to check your calendar." I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" He handed me the folder. Inside was an invitation printed on thick paper with his name at the top, the kind people keep in drawers for years after the night has passed. I read it once, then looked at him. I didn't ask what it meant yet. "You're coming with me," he said simply. "Front row." No debate. The night of the ceremony, the city felt dressed up. Even the air outside the convention center seemed to move slower, like it understood this was a place where people came to be seen. Lights traced the outline of the building, cars lined up at the entrance, and a red carpet runner stretched toward a set of glass doors that reflected more faces than I could count. Corin had sent a car for me, though I told him I could manage on my own. The driver opened my door with a little nod, and when I stepped out, the cool air met the soft fabric of the navy dress I had chosen. I smoothed my hands down the sides, checked the small silver earrings at my ears, and stood there for a moment, letting myself feel it. This was not a wedding. No vows, no altar. Just my son's name printed on an invitation under the words Community Impact and Leadership Award. Inside, staff moved with practiced ease, checking names against lists, guiding guests toward tables draped in white linen. A young woman in a headset glanced at my card, smiled, and said my name like she had rehearsed it. "Miss Olivette Harrington," she said. "You're right up front with the honorees' families. Let me show you. Front row." Again. This time with no one standing across the aisle looking like they might snatch the chair from under me. The ballroom glowed with soft light. A stage sat at the front, flanked by large screens that carried the event logo. People in suits and dresses filled the tables, their laughter low and practiced, the sound of people used to rooms like this. I took my seat near the center, the name card in front of my plate written in careful script. A few minutes later, I felt a familiar presence behind me. "Ma," Corin's voice said. I turned, and there he was in a dark suit that fit him like it had been made with his ambition in mind. He bent and kissed my cheek, the same way he did when he was a boy heading out for school, only now there were cameras somewhere in the room that would catch it. "You all right?" he asked. "I am now," I said. He smiled, that small, real one he saved for when he was not selling anything to anyone. "Stay where you can see me," he said. "They need to see you too." As the program began, speakers took the stage, city officials, business leaders, a pastor from a nearby church. They talked about job creation, youth programs, logistics innovations that sounded almost grand in that room. When they called Corin's name, the applause rose in a way that vibrated through the floor. I watched him walk up those steps. No hesitation, no stumble. He accepted the glass award from a councilwoman, shook her hand, and stepped to the podium. The lights caught his face, and for a second I saw him as the world saw him, successful, polished, steady. Then he spoke, and I heard the boy who used to fall asleep at my table, surrounded by notebooks and dreams. "I appreciate this honor," he said. "People like to talk about what I have built, the contracts, the trucks, the jobs, the support we have been able to give." He paused, letting the words settle. "But nothing I have done started with me," he went on. "It started with a woman who worked nights and kept the lights on, a woman who told me that generosity means nothing if you lose your backbone, a woman who handed me her savings in a coffee tin and told me we would get back up, even if I fell." The room grew quieter. Even the clink of silverware stopped. "My mother is here tonight," he said. "Front row, where she belongs." Heads turned toward me. Heat rose in my face, but I did not lower my eyes. I owed it to both of us to sit in the full light of what he was saying. "Everything I am," Corin said, voice steady. "I am because of her." The applause that followed felt different from the earlier kind. Less performance, more reverence. I felt my vision blur at the edges and blinked until the room sharpened again. A single tear slipped out anyway. I let it fall. There was no shame in it. Later, from the corner of my eye, I caught sight of Dorothy near the back of the room. She stood with colleagues from her new job, name badge pinned neatly to her blouse. Her hands met in a small, respectful clap, her expression soft and humbled. When our eyes met across the distance, she did not look away. She gave a small nod, not asking for anything, just acknowledging the truth we both now understood. I learned afterward that Talia did not come. She watched a recording of the speech on a coworker's phone during a break at the community center. She sent Corin a short message that evening, simple words saying she was proud of the man he had always been and grateful he was finally honoring the woman who made him. She did not call. She did not show up. She let the moment belong to us. At home that night, after the dress was on its hanger and the shoes were back in their box, I sat on the edge of my bed with the program in my hands. His name was printed there, and under it, a few lines about his achievements. No space on the page for the years that led to that podium. That part lived in me. They had tried to cut that part down once, in a room filled with flowers and vows that never got spoken. They misread my distance as absence, my quiet as weakness, my sacrifices as something that could be brushed aside with one cruel sentence. They underestimated my motherhood, but it was the very thing that rebuilt what they broke.